Now that you've reviewed all the sections of the module and the mini-essay prompt, you're prepared for a detailed review of this model mini-essay. Before jumping into the meat of the paragraph, take a look at this paper and how it was formatted using MLA style. Observe the elements of the header placed to the left of the page. Notice it goes from student name to the instructor's name to the English course number, and then you include the date. There's also a running header. There should be the student's last name, not the instructor's last name, followed by the page number, and that goes to the top right. And the title. There is no title here, but one should be included. And treat the title as a preview of what you are writing about. See how all lines are consistently double spaced. No more and no less. The margins, both top and bottom, are 1 inch. Most page formats are automatically set to have side margins at 1 1/4 inches. So you may have to select the Layout tab at the top right of your document processor's toolbar to adjust the margins. As a final point, note the use of parenthetical citations. Be sure to place the page number in parentheses after the quote and followed by an appropriate punctuation mark, whether a period or a question mark. After you've read the sample, you can see that just about every element of the paragraph structure that I require is present. Take a look at the outline I've created. I plugged in sentences from the model into the outline to demonstrate how this paper has all the elements present. A couple of elements were missing: the transition expression from support sandwich number 1 to support sandwich number 2, and the context for support sandwich number 2. A little bit of context about this mini-essay. It was written by a student in one of my literature classes. I prepared the students in that literature class with an essay on how to analyze race in literature, which that student applied very well here. You're not expected to analyze the struggles of racial identity in Ask the Dust, though you are more than welcome to, and there's plenty to be said about it. Of course, if you have taken other courses that have provided intellectual frameworks that you think could apply to your analysis of this novel's main character, Arturo Bandini, you are encouraged to use them. Any number of frameworks such as gender, sexuality, class, ethnicity, philosophy could be used. Indeed, you could even use a psychological framework supplied by the class reading on assertiveness, passiveness, and aggressiveness. In fact, I strongly recommend that you consider how Arturo exhibits any of those behavioral patterns. Frameworks such as these are really helpful for creating complex, precise, and significant analysis. Analysis is all about explaining how something is significant. Semiotics, or sign analysis, that we talked about earlier in this module, gives you a method for that explanation by looking at how context, the surrounding details, are related to the sign being analyzed. Look at how the writer interpreted different signs here. First, note that the writer provides details in the context that are useful to the analysis. Thomas is a culturally inclined Native American, or someone who believes in the value of knowing his Native American identity. That information is mentioned right here. Moreover, we also get the detail that he expresses this value for his Native American identity through the stories he tells. Here in the context, the student writer has already interpreted a detail by association. Thomas's stories signify how much he values his ethnicity. This sets up the detail that's quoted, the analogy between Thomas telling stories to his fellow Native Americans on the reservation and a dentist in a town with people who have false teeth. The Native Americans he talks to have no use for his stories because they are like the townspeople with false teeth. If stories are a sign of valuing one's ethnic culture, and the Native Americans on the reservation don't value Thomas's stories, then these Native Americans don't value their own culture. Their rejection of their own culturally infused stories is a manifestation of internalized racism, because the rejection of their culture comes from within, which is what internal means, from the inside. You can see that the student writer provided a support sandwich that directly connects back to the topic sentence claim. And there is your topic sentence. Furthermore, both support sandwiches back up the topic sentence claim, but both provide slightly different interpretations that present a really clever and complex argument examining how internalized racism appears in the stories being discussed. Both support sandwiches provide examples of internalized racism. However, each one provides a different kind of internalized racism. Whereas the first support sandwich demonstrates internalized racism, the form of not accepting or having use for stories that continue to pass on Native American culture, the second support sandwich shows how internalized racism can be expressed aggressively by one Native American attacking another. And the second support sandwich begins about here, at this point, in Every Little Hurricane. And it continues. In the attack, one negates the authenticity of the other's Native American identity by associating that one with being white. The student writer doesn't elaborate on how whiteness is particularly offensive because it's associated with the identity of those that colonize Native American lands and oppress them as a people. This may have been a strategic choice that the student made because the paragraph was already reaching the maximum length and assumed the reader, either his fellow classmates or instructor, was aware of this information. In any case, the analysis provided here is very strong and well developed. With regards to language, note how the student uses specific names and places. Details are provided to help the reader understand. Also, observe how cursing that was included in the second quote there it is. This is perfectly appropriate because the student included it within a quote that was analyzed. Using that kind of language outside of a quote, or using it in a quote but not analyzing the quote, is inappropriate. Overall, this model sets a high standard that I hope you all aspire to. Clearly, the student who submitted this writing assignment understood the skills needed to write a paragraph and applied them well. Of course, it's not perfect. No transition is provided, and some things were assumed and left unexplained, but it's a very good model to follow.